Hello guys and welcome back. This is David here at CEG Dealer School, but this is going on Casino Quest and this is my shooter rules. So all the rules that applies to all of you out there who want to shoot some dice. So we get a lot of questions in terms of like, okay, when do I shoot? How do I shoot? What are the rules of the casino as far as shooting goes? And some of those kind of vary. So we're going to start from the very beginning and I'm going to walk you through the whole process of being a shooter and having some confidence, getting up to the game and shooting the dice. So this isn't about setting, this is just about normal shooting, sort of the protocols are in place to be a shooter on a craps game, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the selection process. So it's real easy. At the very beginning, you'll see the stick person will dump the bowl. There'll be 5 dice in the middle of the table, which essentially tells you that they're on the lookout for a new shooter. Now here I am on base. I'm not in the stick position because we're kind of showing you how it works from the shooter's perspective, okay? But if I was on stick, I would have this bowl. I would have 5 or 6 dice in my bowl. I would dump the bowl and I would start the process of looking for a new shooter. If it's a very new game, I'm going to start top of the class on third base, okay? Or if you're a player, the right side of the table, okay? So this is called top of the class. This would be the first. If there was a person right here, they would be the first shooter on this table if this is a new table opening. And then it proceeds clockwise around the game. Now the person that gets to shoot is the next person with either a pass line or a don't pass bet. You have to have one or the other or both if you bet both in order to shoot the dice, okay? You also have to be at the game while the dice are being or the shooter is being selected. So if you just come up to the game and you happen to just jump into a spot where the next shooter might be selected, you might be passed because there are other people who have been at the table waiting to be the shooter, okay? Now, anybody can pass. They can choose not to shoot the dice, and this is often the case. Me, personally, I don't like to shoot, so regardless of whether I'm on the pass line or don't pass, I usually just typically wave my hand or let the stick person know that you're not interested in shooting. Now, some people will try and jump positions. Some people who like to shoot will try to come from another position and move into a position where they might be selected next to shoot. This is not okay because there are other people waiting to shoot. It's considered rude. So if the stick person sees you doing this or a supervisor sees you doing this, they'll say you need to pass that person or that person needs to wait until the dice come back around to them. So, we ask the players to have some patience, exercise some patience. We know you guys like to shoot. And if you want to shoot, just kind of wait your turn. You know what I'm saying? So just be aware of that. Now, as far as being a shooter, of course, you can bet from the pass line or the don't pass like we discussed, or both. But now, if you're betting from the pass line, you're betting what's called with the shooter. If you're betting from the don't pass, you're betting against yourself or against the shooter, right? So on the pass line, once you shoot, you're looking for a point, you're looking to make the point. On the don't pass, you roll a point, you're looking for a 7 before that point, just so we're sort of back, we understand sort of the rules and what's in play. So once you're selected as a shooter, the stick person will dump the bowl, of course, the dice will be in the middle, and then they'll use the stick to pass 5 dice to you, okay? So they'll line them up, they'll pass the 5 dice out to the next person that'll be a shooter, and then you get to select 2 from the 5 or 6 dice that are available to you. Believe it or not, some casinos now, they have 6, not just 5, but most will have just 5. So we ask that you select just 2, and I say we because, there's there's a little bit of etiquette that goes into being a shooter. For one, select the 2 that you're interested in using. You can either push the other 3 away and give us some room, or wait a second before picking up the 2. Give the stick person a chance to retrieve the 3 extra dice or 4 extra dice and put them back into the bowl so we can sort of stay in tune, or stay synced up with the shooter. If you take the dice and too quickly throw the dice to the other side of the table, it takes a minute or takes a second for the stick person to retrieve the dice. They might not be able to call the dice. They would have to ask for the base person to call the dice, and then it takes a second for them to kind of sync up with the shooter. So if you can, please, wait a second. So select the 2 that you want. Give the stick person a second or 2 to retrieve the dice and put them back into the bowl. So everything is sort of copacetic on the game, right? All right. So once you have selected the 2 dice that you want to shoot, there's a few rules that are in play that affect sort of how you're going to next shoot the dice. One of them is most casinos don't like you to do practice rolls against the back wall. By that is just picking up and just rolling the dice out. You know, so avoid that. The other rule is a lot of casinos don't like you to stack dice. So it just depends on where you're at. But stacking dice is by putting one die on top of the other. And the thought is that this ultimately ruins the dice. If people are allowed to do this on a continual basis, it might chip away the dice or this kind of thing. But of course, by the way, the dice are changed relatively frequently, at least once a shift. So at the beginning of a new shift, new set of dice, sometimes the dice can be changed multiple times. You'll see casinos at the end of a very hot roll, take the dice off the table and replace them with a new set of dice, this type of thing. It's also important to keep the dice over the table in view of the stick person. And by that, we ask that you have an open hand. Keep an open hand when handling the dice. If you want to switch hands, put the dice back on the table and then use your other hand that you want to use the dice. Okay, so if you need to switch hands, you can't just throw them into your other hand. And if you do so, the stick person will ask you to set the dice down, and then they'll bring them back into the center of the table, and they have to go through inspecting the dice, this type of thing. In fact, if you do anything out of the ordinary or anything within the bounds of sort of managing the rules that affect the dice, the stick person may ask you to put them back on the table and may move the dice into the center of the game where a supervisor can inspect them. So that's another rule. So no practice rolls, okay? You can't throw them from hand to hand, all right? If you want to switch hands, you have to put them down in the game, okay? The other thing is they have to be in view at all times, okay? So that you can't bring them back behind the bumper, you can't bring them off the game, you can't conceal the dice, you can't cup the dice like this, all right? You can't close your hand over the dice either. So anytime the dice are outside the view of the stick person, they may ask you, or they should ask you, to set the dice down, and then they would have to move them into the center of the table, and then they will check. So what they check for is the serial numbers that the serial numbers match. In this case, the serial numbers do not match, and these would not be valid dice on the game, and you would not be able to roll. But that's what they're checking for. They make sure the serial numbers match, and the supervisor, in some cases, may look at the die and sort of visually inspect it. They even have a mic to make sure that it's everything is equalized, that type of thing. But that's the thing. I've only ever seen one person try to sort of manufacture the dice, and he was using some kind of tar on his pinky, and I don't know what he was thinking. We caught him in one roll. You could see almost immediately that the dice they had this little brown goo on it. It was so silly. But in the past, people have done everything to the dice to try to change the outcome of the rolls, and so casinos are very careful about making sure that the dice are always in view, and there's very little chance that someone can mess with the dice. Or if the dice are outside the view, or someone tries to mess with the dice, there's lots of protocols to sort of reset, bring the dice in the middle, have a supervisor look at the dice, and that type of thing. Okay. So the other thing now with Corona is they don't want you blowing on the dice. You can't do anything, or kissing the dice, which is kind of disgusting actually, but blowing the dice, kissing on the dice, interacting in a way that's not sort of virus or germ friendly, that type of thing. Okay. Now, you also can't pass the dice off to someone else. So if you're selected as the shooter, that's your turn to shoot. You can't then have someone else come up behind you and shoot. The one exception to that is before you actually select your pair of dice, let's say you have a husband, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever the case is, you can have them stand in for you to shoot in lieu of you being the shooter. You wouldn't then be able to shoot after them, but if you had someone, they could come up to the table, select the dice that they want, and start as the shooter. But once you select your dice, you're in it to win it. So you pick those two, you pick that pair of dice, and you're ready to go, okay? Now, some other basic rules will affect, so if you hire a setter or how you want to throw the dice, this type of thing. I talked about the stacking part of it, which is, usually a no-no at most casinos. Some casinos don't care, but most would rather you not. The other thing is setting the dice. There are people who like to set the dice. Even I set the dice a certain way. I will set it on like a V, this type of thing, just to shoot them. I don't spend long, to be honest with you. I'm not one that's looking for a real specific turn or trying to, try to manufacture or be what they call an advantage player. But the rule typically is, in Vegas anyways, as long as you don't spend too much time, within a couple seconds, you set them and release, right? There are some casinos out of market that don't let you set the dice at all. You literally have to pick them up as is and throw them, or have them in your hand and shake them and throw them, what they call a random shooter. So that's also a thing. So just be aware, the rules change casino to casino, depends on, sort of how they what type of rolls they want. I will say this, at no casino can you throw the dice against the mirror. I have seen people try to, do practice rolls against the mirror. That's not allowed. And sort of practicing on the back, like this, or throwing them backwards before you send them forward is also a no-no at most casinos. So anything that takes away from the pace of the game or making sure that the dice are thrown accurately or randomly, that's a thing. All right, another thing that casinos want you to do is hit the back wall with both dice. So as long as you're trying to hit the back wall, that's the goal. If one die should not hit the back wall, even both dice should not hit the back wall, occasionally, it's not a problem. If you keep avoiding hitting the back wall, a supervisor or even the stick person will say something to you, they'll warn you or remind you to please hit the back wall. And if you keep doing it, then they might interfere and ask you to pass the dice. Or they'll tell you, listen, if you do it again, we're not going to let you shoot. And that's the thing. So it's very important that you hit the back wall. The casino wants the roll to be as random as possible. There's also the potential of having an errant roll or having a die sort of go off the table, or both dice go off the table, or maybe one dice is high, this type of thing. And so depending on the situation, it affects the dice in a different way. If you should throw a die off the table, the stick person will typically dump the bowl and send you a new set. You could, of course, ask for the same die. Or even if both dice go off, you can ask for the same dice and then wait for the same dice. In order to get the same dice, you'd have to wait a second. The dice need to be handed in. The supervisor would inspect the dice, make sure that they're the same number that's supposed to be on the game, put them in the center of the game, and the stick person would pass you that same dice. But by default, the stick person will dump the bowl, does not wait for the dice to return to the table, will just dump the bowl and pass you a new set of dice. But there's a lot of people who, let's say you're in the middle of a big hand, you love the dice that you've been shooting with, it's perfectly fine to ask for the same dice. Now, if you should roll a die high, by that I mean it ends up in the rail, it ends up on the money or in the bank area, this type of thing. Again, those cases, the die is just literally set back onto the table and then passed back to you. The stick person doesn't dump the bowl. You just get the same dice back and you move on with the roll. There's also the potential for interference with the dice itself, right? So if someone should try to interfere with the roll, it's a no roll automatically. If someone puts a hand out and tries to hit the dice, or someone literally takes like a purse or this type of thing, hits the dice, it's no roll. However, if the dice should bounce off literally someone's head, which I've seen, or a purse or some other part of the body and fall back on the table and there's an outcome, then it's not interference because it's just sort of a normal thing. No one tried to manufacture the outcome and it would be called as a roll. Now there's other parts of the table. So for example, if the dice should roll and get stuck on a chip or wedged a certain way or this kind of thing, again, it's just called no roll. Dice are returned to the center of the table. Then you would get the dice and then you can roll again. Easy peasy and off and breezy. Yeah, where's our cutting board? We have a cutting board around here somewhere. Anyways, all right. So how do you lose the dice? Well, you lose the dice very easy. So the first way you lose the dice, if you roll a 7 out. If you get onto a number and you roll a 7 before your number, you lose a dice. The stick person dumps the bowl, and a new shooter would then be selected after you, okay? The other way to lose a dice is if you're not cooperating. If you're not hitting the back wall or you're doing something consistently out of the bounds of the casino, or if by chance you haven't outstanded a warrant and you're arrested on the game, you gotta pass the dice. They're not gonna wait for you to finish your roll. That's just a thing, okay? The other way you can lose the dice is if you're a don't pass better, okay? Here you have a contract bet, you can't go anywhere, you gotta finish your roll. But as a don't pass better, not a contract bet, you could pick this up and go. And I've seen people go to the bathroom or leave the casino, and then again, you gotta pass the dice. You no longer have money in play, you have to have money in play on the pass and a don't pass to keep shooting the dice. So if you pick up your don't pass at any time, and you no longer have a bet in play, you would effectively lose the dice. You don't have any money in play. It would go to the next person to shoot the dice and end your roll for you. And there you go. That's Shooter Rules. Hope you guys enjoyed. And thank you for checking us out. Make sure to get to CasinoQuest.biz if you'd like to make a reservation and learn some more. And I look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.